there are those who dream of possibilities. The ancient diseases that have kept millions in poverty. Now, for the first time, the dream is within our reach.
Welcome to the Lifelines, the quest for global health, Google Hangout. I'm Veronica Pedrosa. You might have seen me on Al Jazeera English in the past, but I'm really happy to be able to welcome you to this cross-platform project that profiles the extraordinary work of global health workers as they tackle 8 deadly diseases and conditions that afflict vulnerable communities across the globe. Today is World Malaria Day, so of course we're concentrating on malaria, and we are releasing a third Lifelines film. It's called The End Game. It is airing on Al Jazeera English, of course. And what this Hangout hopes to do is to enhance our coverage. And joining us are experts to talk about the situation surrounding malaria, the fight against malaria at the moment. Joining us from Spain, Dr. Carlos Shakur. He actually came to us through our Lifelines community. He was a doctor in Venezuela, and he's an expert in tropical medicine. He spent time working on neglected diseases in the Amazon and looked specifically at vector control. Those are the animals that carry diseases, then transmit them to people, for example, mosquitoes in the case of malaria. Also joining us is Trish DeLude. She's in New York, and she's a program officer for special projects for Malaria No More. She manages projects that are based in Africa. Prior to joining Malaria No More, Trish also worked with a sister organization, Millennium Promise. Thanks very much to both of you. We are facing really a desperate situation when it comes to malaria. It's very much a disease of poverty. Malaria No More says that a child dies every minute because of malaria. Let me ask you, Patricia DeLude, what progress has been made reducing malaria in the last 10 years?
Tremendous progress has been made, actually, since 2010. Malaria deaths among young children, who are one of the most vulnerable populations, have fallen by over 50%. That is a huge, huge coup. And, you know, it doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work to do. Still, over 3 million people annually are suffering from the disease, at risk of the disease. But these rates are falling and falling faster and faster every year.
Okay, you concentrate on Africa, and I just want to point out to viewers that 35 countries, most of them in Africa, are responsible for 96% of all malaria cases worldwide, and about 40% of malaria deaths occur in just 2 countries, Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. You've concentrated on the situation in Latin America, Dr. Carlos Shakur. What's your view about the progress that's been made in the last 10 years?
Well, Latin America, the problem is basically in the Amazon basin, and it's mostly mobile communities, which are difficult to cover. We also do not have the huge prevalence of Plasmodium falciparum, which is the one that causes the most severe forms of the disease. So I think the progress in Latin America has been mostly related to economic development in the last 10 years. Improvements in the situation of families living in rural areas have led to also an improvement in the prevalence of some of these diseases like malaria.
And you've been working specifically on a drug that kills the mosquitoes that transmit malaria. Can you tell us a bit more about your work?
Well, it began in 2008 when I was studying in London, at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And we were one day talking about ivermectin, how it's used for ribbon blindness control, onchocerciasis, and how it also kills ectoparasites like lice or scabies. And I said, well, maybe it also kills mosquitoes. So we designed a clinical trial to test it. And we gave it to volunteers, and we fed mosquitoes on them. And what we found out is that if you have taken ivermectin, by the next day, almost 90% of mosquitoes that feed on you will die very quickly.
That's really interesting and innovative, but is it something that has much support? There's been a lot of talk about a vaccine, for example, that might be the silver bullet for malaria. I mean, what do you think about innovations like Dr. Carla Shakur is talking about, Patricia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the work that he's doing is absolutely critical. We have some really incredible tools that have helped us get to where we are today, including mosquito nets, including fast-acting treatments and rapid diagnostic tests. But, you know, in order to really go the extra mile and really reach elimination one day, we need to be looking down the line and looking at things like resistance and behavior modification of the mosquitoes, which is exactly what he's working on. You know, there is a huge risk looming in places like the Laos-Cambodia border. We're seeing resistance to one of our last sort of bastions of hope, which is artemisinin. We're seeing insecticide or or viral resistance to this disease, to this treatment, and that's especially scary because we know historically that is where we saw resistance to quinine, which was the sort of original treatment for malaria, and we sort of watched it move across, you know, Asia, over India, and into Africa. And so that is, we're seeing that same pattern of resistance again with our sort of our last good treatment is really scary. And so the work that he's doing to sort of work on these different types of resistance, both in the mosquitoes and the virus, is hugely valuable.
Yeah, let's talk about what's worked and what hasn't, both in terms of treatment and in terms of prevention. Mosquito nets, for example, insecticide that have been sprayed with insecticides are one of the things that a lot of families could benefit from, but there's not enough money for everyone. And that's one of the things that I find really disturbing about the situation surrounding malaria. It is a disease that kind of picks out on people who are absolutely poor, and there's not enough funding for it. You talked about economic development, Dr. Carlos, and how that is one of the big issues. Can you elaborate further?
Well, there has been an enormous increase in investment in malaria since 2007. Bill and Melinda Gates announced very boldly that their goal, or the ultimate goal, was to eradicate the disease. And at that time, talking about eradication was taboo. And they came out and said, "Hey, we look no less than to eradicate this disease." And since then, money has flown into the malaria research area from them and from other areas, from other sources that have joined the fight. So I do think there has been lots of investment in malaria in the last 6 years, 7 years now. But although we've seen enormous progress, we do know that it's not enough with the funding we're getting right now. There is a huge gap in the innovation, and more money needs to be invested into new technologies if we really want to reach eradication one day.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a figure that says malaria is estimated to cost Africa more than $12 billion every year in lost GDP, but it could be controlled for a fraction of that sum. What do you make of figures like that? Does that square with your experience, Patricia?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, that was a McKinsey study done a few years ago, and I think it really speaks volumes about the opportunity that fighting malaria presents and ending malaria presents. A lot of that cost is seen in the everyday economies of families, as you were talking about. That this is a disease that picks on the poorest communities and the poorest countries, and people who are already quite vulnerable to a range of diseases. And I think part of what makes malaria such an opportunity is that if you are able to take it off just get rid of malaria, you have freed up so many resources to improve infrastructures and
And
to fight other diseases.
yeah, I mean, there's a personal aspect to it as well, because families in Africa apparently are spending an average of a quarter of their income on malaria treatment if they're stricken by malaria, and these are families that are often absolutely poor, as in earning less than $1.25 a day. That just seems like an incredible waste of money, as it were, for a disease that's entirely preventable. I mean, why is malaria so devastating compared to other neglected tropical diseases? What's the difference, Dr. Jahour?
Well, malaria, especially the parasite that is most prevalent in Africa, it's deadly for one thing. I mean, in children under 5, it often leads, or it can easily lead to cerebral malaria or to severe anemia. And then those children that survive in areas of high prevalence after 5 years, and they gain a bit of immunity, but then the co-prevalence of malaria with other diseases basically makes all the problems more severe. If you reach good net coverage, for example, and take malaria out of game in a place, you can see that the whole child mortality is diminished by 20%. So to give you an idea of the influence of malaria on other diseases as well.
All right, we've had some questions come into the Lifelines team from social media sources. I want to ask a question on behalf of Abdul Salam Ibrahim. He's in Nigeria. The question that he asked is how one can educate the less educated masses to prevent them from catching the disease. What would your answer be, Patricia?
Well, that's one of the things that Malaria No More works very hard to do, is exactly that, empowering people with the information they need in order to protect themselves. One of the programs that we've actually just freshly launched in Nigeria is called Night Watch. And it is a broadcast platform that sends nightly reminders nationally through television and through radio that features celebrities that Nigerians know. It's their favorite soccer players, it's their favorite hip-hop artists, it's their favorite Nollywood actors, reminding them nightly to sleep under a mosquito net, letting them know that there is such thing as a rapid diagnostic test, that they can go and get tested and ensure that they're treating the proper disease if it is malaria. And so I think in addition to empowering people with this sort of personalized information that they can then take home and act on with their family, it's also a platform for leaders and radio personalities and politicians to get involved and feel as if they are making a difference and really putting malaria on the tip of everybody's tongue and keeping it as a true priority in the country where it is so devastating.
All right, that's one aspect of the fight against malaria. Let's talk about the nature of the disease a bit more with Dr. Jahour, because Danny Reindertse, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Netherlands, wrote to us with the question, is malaria a man-made disease or is its origin found in nature itself? And actually, let me put this other aspect of the disease to you, because we've also had a question on the same kind of issue from Jessica Bender, who's in California, asking if malaria is more of a consequence of poverty and economic patterns.
Well, this is the classic cauldron, right, of malaria being the cause or the consequence of poverty. And there's people in every side of this question. There's people who strongly bet for malaria being the source of poverty, because if you are sick and cannot work on the fields, or if your father is sick and you have to care for him, then it leads to less production and poverty as well. But also, malaria dwells on poverty. If you live on a poorly built house and don't have access to sanitation, then it's perfect for mosquitoes to breed around your house, and it increases, poverty increases the prevalence of malaria as well. So I don't think I am the person to give a definitive answer to this, because it's a discussion that's been going on for years. My personal view is that malaria causes more poverty than poverty causes malaria. But as I said, there's experts very heavily answering in one and the other side.
I mean, does it have to be one or the other? I mean, the issue is to break the cycle, irrespective of which one is feeding the other, isn't it? Did you want to butt in at this point, Patricia?
No, I have to say I agree with the good doctor. I think that, as you pointed out, it's a huge sap on national economies, on local economies, and you see it every day in families. And the idea that you can't go to work because your child is sick, or you now have to choose between extra fertilizer that would increase your productivity on your farm and getting that treatment because that somebody truly needs, or investing in your safety through a mosquito net, it really just saps the economy. And on broader scales, you look at businesses like ExxonMobil, who have worked on the African continent for some time. They have done studies where they look and see how badly malaria has impacted their bottom dollar, their bottom line, and have since become one of the biggest private sector funders of malaria in the world. And that's just a business case for them, and that's it's a human rights cause as well.
It's World Malaria Day, as we all know. I suppose it's a good opportunity to think about what the situation was a year ago to what the situation is now, and then project to a year from now what you think you'll be saying next year on this day. Dr. Carlos, can you tell us, will you be able, do you think, to talk about what works and what hasn't worked in a more kind of narrow way?
Well, in last year, what we've seen is a decrease in the estimated deaths worldwide. We don't have very strong statistics on this. We estimate them, and we've seen that there's a decrease in what we've estimated. And also, the malaria map is shrinking. A few other countries can say today something that they couldn't a year ago, is that they have eliminated malaria. Colombia, for example. Colombia now. But there are countries that have eliminated malaria in the last year. So what I hope is that in the next year we will be able to eliminate malaria in a couple of countries more, and to further reduce the malaria map.
Why is there this situation where you have these amazing success stories that you're citing, Dr. Shakur, Carlos Shakur, but Patricia, in Africa, where your work is concentrated, it just doesn't seem to be getting any better in places like, as we mentioned, Dr. Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Right. Well, the Congo is sort of that's a really complicated situation, and part of the reason it's just really hard to work there, and I can't speak with any level of authority on that, but I do think there are huge success stories to be told in Africa as well. The malaria prevalence rate in South Africa is down to 10%. That is huge. And right on the border, Zambia is also making, they're capitalizing on that success and the fact that they don't have malaria now coming over the border from South Africa, and they're also seeing huge success. And so I think one of the ways we're going to see this malaria map really shrinking is in pockets. And so I think we are seeing a lot of progress in Africa.
The focus then for a year from now, in your mind, would you think that you would like to see in World Malaria Day 2015 to be able to say, okay, the malaria has disappeared from the map in X number of pockets in various areas of Africa?
So I can't speak with the utmost authority on that, but I think one of the things that's been really that I've seen a difference in from last year World Malaria Day is that we're getting better at measuring it. It's really hard to make good strides and to invest your resources very smartly when you don't know exactly where it is, exactly when it is, when there's an outbreak, what people are doing about it. And I think this really the this needs to be a data-driven fight, and I think we're getting smarter about that, and I expect to see a lot more of that by the time this World Malaria Day next year.
Well, I want to ask actually about the everyday challenges that health workers are facing. I know that both of you probably have inputs on that. Can you tell us about your experience, Dr. Shakur?
Well, one of my problems was in the Amazon was that some communities are very mobile. So once you reach them and you vaccinate, for example, for other diseases, or you distribute nets, or you deworm them, then if you come back a few months later, you have trouble finding them again. So it's difficult to give continuity in areas with mobile communities. That was my daily struggle in the Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Patricia?
I think the daily struggles of a health worker in Africa, especially, are really multifold. I think, one of the problems that Malaria No More has been trying to address through a program called The Power of One is the issue of stockouts, which is when you're running low on a commodity, for instance, a treatment, packets of treatments, and you send out for more treatments, and it's all sort of paper-based, and by the time you really need those treatments, they're not there yet. And so the Power of One raised, these are, and it's such a shame, especially because these are $1 in value. A 3-day course that completely rids the malaria parasite from your system it costs $1. So, it's especially tragic when a child goes and you don't have those treatments. And so ensuring that the systems work better, ensuring that the commodities are in the country and available when someone goes and needs them, I think that has to be one of the hardest things about being a healthcare provider.
Yeah, really challenging. I just want to quote one of the health heroes that we have profiled on Lifelines, Pedrosa Okumu, who couldn't join us today, but he has said that the mosquitoes we're dealing with are clever animals. They're competing for resources as well. If you put pressure on them by killing as many of them as possible, they start to become resilient at a certain stage. And that means if you spring back, if you recoil, if you stop doing what you're doing, they're going to bounce back. And if they bounce back, they're probably going to be resistant to whatever interventions you have. We now are almost ethically bound to attempt to eliminate the disease so it doesn't come back. That's Pedrosa Okumu, Lifeline's health hero and a research scientist. He lost his own sister to malaria. So I just wanted to quote him to show the determination that many health workers have, despite all the challenges that you just outlined, the both of you. We've got about 5 minutes left for the Hangout, so what I wanted to do is wrap up by asking you a final question about what people who are watching this can do to help. Dr. Shakur, you first.
Well, there's always opportunity for the public to get involved. Right now, there's several organizations working and asking for funds, for example, to receive donations. There's people asking for volunteers to work in education. So our own work, for example, is being funded through a crowdfunding campaign. So if you are really interested, just go look for it, and you will find a place where you can be very useful as well, either by giving a contribution or by giving time, or by spreading the word.
Everything helps, in other words. What about you, Patricia?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think it's, Dr. Shakur's fundraising effort, his crowdfunding effort for his campaign, and I think, the Power of One is a great opportunity to get involved and to, in small ways ensure that a child is getting treated in Africa. Another, sort of fundamental way that it's important is ensuring that as the Night Watch program attempts to do in Africa and keeping malaria a top agenda item here in the United States and globally, ensuring that our leaders also see it as a priority, and one of the ways you do that is let them know that it's a priority to you, getting in touch with your public officers.
All right, thanks very much to both of you. Just want to remind everyone we've been speaking to Dr. Carlos Shakur, researcher at the Malaria Mission Project at the University of Navarre. He's in Spain. Patricia Delude is a program officer on the Africa programs team at the NGO Malaria No More, and she joined us from New York. Thank you very much to both of you. Just want to let viewers know also that you can find out more about malaria and other neglected diseases on aljazeera.com/lifelines. The Endgame, that Lifelines film that I mentioned a bit earlier, it actually features Pedrosa, Okumu, who we quoted from just a minute ago, and it'll be available online from World Malaria Day on this day, the 25th of April. And do send us your questions and comments on @AJLifelines, that's our Twitter handle, or find us on Facebook. We've really enjoyed being able to broaden out, enrich our own as well as your knowledge of what world malaria really means to people around the world and how the fight is going. Thanks very much.